Welcome to the O Brother Podcast. I'm your host, Dan Smith. Alongside me, as always, my brother from the same mother, Mike Smith.
Uh,
Wow, we both got gags going on here.
What's going on here with the props?
What is okay? Explain yourself.
I saw you in the Eyes Wide Shut movie. You were dead on in the
What is
corner.
with the? Why are you
Oh,
wearing
I'm sorry. This is because I just watched The Crow, and
I don't get it.
it's whiplash from
I
the
don't get it.
directing. From the directing.
I'll
get
should
into
have saved
it.
that for deeper into the.
Maybe,
Yeah.
but I
Thanks
couldn't.
for taking us down a wormhole immediately. Good night, folks. Listen, we're in Halloween Fest at Oh Brother, which of
We're in
course
the
we've been doing for
throes
the
of it.
last 2-3 years. And we're going to do a film now. Arguably, you could maybe make an argument this isn't really in the Halloween horror genre, but
Oh, I think it is.
I would beg to differ. Good. I'm glad you said that. So we're
Yeah.
talking about The Crow from 1994, starring Brandon Lee. And I don't remember. Now, I think I was living back in Boston at the time. So, and I don't have a deep enough recall to know. I must have seen this in the theater, but I'm not sure. But I did enjoy the film at the time, and it was kind of a sleeper hit. It sort of, grew in
Oh,
cult.
it's a cult favorite.
It's a cult favorite. Yeah, for sure.
Definitely.
And of course, with the tragic death of Brandon Lee, it adds that mystique to it for good or bad. You know what I mean?
Correct.
And we'll of course talk about that. But let me just give a few stats on the film
Sure.
for those who may not have seen The Crow. But it was released in May 13th, 1994, rather. Of course, it's rated R. And we'll probably talk a little bit about that with the violence and whatnot. Budget of about $23 million. I guess it's back in 94. It ended up going on to gross worldwide about $100 million, give or take. A runtime about an hour and 40 minutes, which was pretty typical back then. It's directed by Alex Proyas. Did you dive into this at all?
Of course I did.
Okay, so what is he? I can't see it. The glare. Yes. What is
One of
that?
my
Is that a
favorite
video
movies.
game? Why is
No.
that green?
It came in green. It's not an Xbox case. It came in green. The only
Really?
Blu-ray ever. And
That is
also one of my
weird.
favorite Alex Proyas movies.
iRobot.
Robot.
Yeah, right. So I was immediately, oh, Mike is going to love this because I'm sure you didn't know until now that he was the director of Dark
No,
City.
I didn't. Oh no, I knew he was the director of Dark City. As soon as
But
I
you didn't
saw
make
Alex Proyas,
you didn't make the connection between The Crow and
not The Crow, no.
right? So,
And I still can't believe it, Dan. I can't believe it.
Well, as we talk about the film, I mean, I think I can see stylistically, right? You're talking about two kind of graphic novel-looking type movies, right? Like
Yeah.
Sin City, like in that kind of vein, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Now he also did a film called Knowing. You remember that with Nick Cage?
Yes, with Nick
back in
Cage. I've seen that.
2009. Yeah. All right, but let's run down the cast now. Of course, we mentioned the star, Brandon Lee as Eric Draven. I don't know if you can see my Eric Draven. I just got my Crow Funko Pop, and I had to add it to my collection.
Nice.
Now Michael Wincott plays Top Dollar. If you've seen a television show or a movie since the 80s,
you know
who Michael Wincott is. In fact, I was shocked to find out that Michael Wincott was in Nope, which was, of course, directed by Jordan Peele.
Just recently.
I mean, he's a lot different looking now. He's aged and he looks great.
Yeah,
but
really long hair. I think it was a wig.
In The Crow, that's what my girlfriend said too. And I thought, really, it looked pretty real to me.
He's got that voice.
He's got that voice. He really does. But he has got a resume like, as long as anything.
Oh, yeah. It's like as soon as you hear the voice, you're like, I know who that is.
Absolutely, yeah.
But I don't know what from.
Yeah, and just a classic sort of villain from that period of time,
And yeah, go ahead.
No, it's all right, go.
I was going to say, this is post-Batman, post-Dick Tracy, post-Batman Returns.
Yeah.
I'm surprised the effects were so bad, Dan. Surprised the effects were so down. And it had to be a tip to Jack Nicholson. Because he kind of has a Jack Nicholson sounding voice sometimes.
Yeah.
And like when the Crow jumps on the table in the gang room and he looks up, nice outfit.
Nice outfit.
All I'm thinking is he's
Yeah,
channeling
it
Jack.
could be, yeah.
Yeah.
That's a fair point. I'll just quickly run down some of the other cast. Rochelle Davis plays Sarah. Ernie Hudson, of course, from
He
Ghostbusters
was really
fame.
good.
He was
He
really good,
was
yeah.
good.
And he has a central role in the film, of course,
Correct.
as Sergeant or Officer Albrecht.
Probably his
He's a police
biggest
officer.
role I've seen him in.
Perhaps Bai Ling, who plays Michael Wincott's kind of wing woman, if you will,
Mhm.
named Micah. Bai Ling is a very famous, especially on social media. She's very famous. Sophia Sheenus or Shinus, who plays Shelley Webster. David Patrick Kelly, who plays T-Bird. Michael Massey, who we'll come back to, who played Fun Boy. Tony Todd, who played Grange, who also famously portrayed Candyman. We want to
Mhm.
talk about another horror type film.
I think that's
Uh,
far enough.
no. Lawrence Mason played Tintin. Far enough. Okay, so Mike doesn't want me to mention one of the main characters in the film who also starred in a little film Mike likes called Miller's Crossing that was directed by
Oh,
the
John Polito. Yeah, you
Cohen
gotta mention
brothers.
you should have mentioned him sooner.
John Polito, who we share an ancestry with, let's be honest.
Correct. He's somewhere in the boot is the
Somewhere in
2
the
of us.
boot, it's a Sicilian blood,
Yep.
but John Polito, and he was good in this. He was really good
Yeah.
in this.
He didn't
Now,
give the hi-hat,
And I'm sick of the hi-hat!
again, can you stop with the recreation
but that
of
was
the
a good
scenes?
one. That
It's
was a
not
good
a good
one.
one. It's not.
Give me the
Hey,
hi-hat.
hey, I had an opportunity to do my Shaggy at work today, legitimately. It was interesting. But so this okay, so this takes place now, I said at the top, you can argue it's a horror film or not, but the film literally takes place on Devil's Night, which is October 30th.
Mhm.
So there you go, enough said. Do you wanna quickly give a synopsis of the film?
Yeah, like a lot of people think this is a comic book based on a comic book. It's not. It's a character that was in a comic book.
James O'Barr,
Right.
who
And it
wrote
was
The
like
Crow.
Colossal something
Oh, I don't know that.
because there wasn't a comic book at the time called The Crow.
Hmm.
The Eric Draven was a character in this. Anyways, it's chilling to give you the plot because it's basically about a guy who gets killed,
Mhm.
comes out of his grave, and wants to get retribution for not only his death, but the
Uh,
death of his fiance,
Shelley
Shelley
Webster.
Webster. Thank you.
Right, right,
And really, that's the key. They start on the break into the house,
right.
and like I said, if you ever want to make your bad guys really bad, have them commit rape.
Yeah,
That
right.
makes them instant evil,
Yeah, for sure, yeah,
like the accused with Jodie Foster.
yeah, or any other for that matter.
Yeah,
But you're right. And of course, Brandon Lee's character Eric, he's resurrected and he comes back and basically to avenge the death, like you said. So,
correct.
um, it was interesting. You don't think the opening you weren't getting Dark City vibes right off the bat?
No, I wasn't, and I was looking for it.
Yeah, yeah.
And because Dark City, like one of the things that really and I think this is the first time I've watched it all the way through.
Hmm.
When he first gets shot in the back of the hand and he's holding a stupid prop
Well,
hand.
that was bad. That effect was really bad. But overall, I actually even made the comment while we were watching it that not bad for 1994, but you make a good point about Batman and a few of the other films
Correct.
that had already been out. But then again, look at the budget on Batman versus the budget on
Correct. It's a
The
good
Crow.
point. Good
So, you know
point.
what I mean?
Good point.
And it wasn't used so much that it negatively affected the film. But you're right, that one always bothers me with the
That one
hand.
bothered me and
It
it
bothers
kept
me.
with me the whole time.
Yeah, it looks like he's holding up another arm, which he
Right.
basically I think
He
is.
was. It
Yeah.
was like his arm all of a sudden was really long. And
Yes.
then you could tell they were
It was like a
stealing
sock.
it.
Then it became like a ventriloquist
It
thing or something.
was.
Yeah. Now you point out again the biggest story associated with the film, of course, is the tragic death of Brandon Lee, which,
Right.
as you said, now how is Eric Draven killed? At
Well,
gunpoint. At
right.
gunpoint.
There's a lot of guns. And
Right.
apparently, we know this recently from Alec Baldwin's film. Everybody by now knows
Rust.
Alec Baldwin. Yeah.
Rust. Yeah.
Shot the cinematographer or the assistant director.
Cinematographer, I believe.
Yeah,
Yes.
and she was
Yes.
killed.
That's right.
And all this came out about how dangerous the workplace was. Well, apparently the Crow, the same thing. It was very dangerous. They were working 18-hour days. I mean, I
Mm,
saw interviews, and I
interesting.
saw the
That
one interview that Michael Massey
I
was
saw
the
that too.
actor that shot him.
You have experienced a stunt in your life that went tragically awry.
Tragically awry, and it's and I've never talked about this on camera, and it was shooting of The Crow, and Brandon died during it, and since then I'm very conscious of the dangers of making a movie, and it is a dangerous proposition. We throw ourselves out there with, at least me, with very little regard for my body when I'm doing it.
I wouldn't say the question was to specifically elicit that response from him, but he was very generous
Correct.
in that moment in talking about the incident.
And he was trying to put it in the context of everyone goes through terrible things,
Right.
and you try to get to the other side. But at the time,
Yeah.
he was a he was in California. This was shot in California. And at the time, right after it happened, there was 8 days left in the shoot.
Mhm.
He went right back to New York, which is where he
Mhm.
was from,
Right.
and he was in seclusion for a good year.
Mhm.
Like, nobody could find him.
Understandably.
And he died. This is the 10th anniversary of his death, the 20th of Brandon Lee's. But
30th for
30th, 30th.
Brandon Lee, yeah.
But I think in that interview, he had stomach cancer. He seemed kind of
Oh,
emaciated.
really? Okay.
Yeah. And that's what he
Okay.
died of.
Yeah.
And I think he was kind of at peace, and he
Yeah.
was trying to make his peace with the movie. He says right in it, "I've never talked about it. I never felt a need to."
Right.
I'm sure he talked to plenty of shrinks. I mean, that's gotta be an awful thing.
Well, and some of that was, no, he died in 2016. He only
Oh,
passed
I thought it
7
was
years ago.
then you know what? I'm confusing his and Brandon's death.
He shares a close
Brandon
birthday
died in
too.
'93.
Correct, correct. Yeah, I really felt for him
Yeah.
listening to him in that interview. It was really,
And unlike Alec Baldwin, who the next day was on 60 Minutes or something,
mm,
it was too soon. Stay
it was
out of the limelight.
yeah, it was too
And,
soon.
and, and I felt bad for him. I watched that interview cringing,
Yeah, yeah.
knowing he was dead. And,
Yeah,
and
and this was we've told a more lighthearted story on the podcast before. It's a special episode we put out about some lovely stories of our dad, and this was basically what happened was, you talk about these armorers that are hired to work on these films when there's all
yeah,
these weapons that are being used, especially firearms. And essentially what happened is a slug got caught and remained in the gun,
right,
and it wasn't cleared and checked properly. So
right.
when they ultimately went to load the you know the
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 dummy.
the dummy rounds, it pushed that slug out as if it were a live round with the same kind of propulsion, and and
There's a
that's
couple
what
of
killed him.
there's a couple of different stories. And
Mhm.
somebody even, I don't know if you saw this when you were doing your research, somebody made a cartoon.
Mm. No, I didn't
They
see that.
had the text
Glad I didn't see that. Yeah.
in the report, and they literally redid it, which they did with Alec Baldwin too.
Mhm.
But of course it was a lot more advanced. It was kind of like watching Charlie Brown,
Mhm.
and you heard Alex Proyas say, "Cut, guys, we're good." And they didn't realize it was the last shot of the night.
Yeah.
Brandon never got up. He
No.
was he was moaning.
And a
They thought
and a
he was acting.
well, right, in the moment, especially, like, I think the story was that he fell backwards. He was supposed to
Mhm.
fall forward,
Right.
and then he didn't move, and so they thought, yeah, like you said at first, that he's acting,
And
and
the
there wasn't any, I don't think, noticeable, like, blood or anything, right?
right.
And all of that, so
And the scene is not in the movie for people who, like, get off on that
Right,
kind of
and
thing.
it was basically, this is where whatever digital effects they had at the time, right? It
Yes.
was a combination of that. They did some script changes. They had a stunt double, which you can kinda tell the stunt double.
Yes.
It's not bad,
No, no.
but you can tell. And then I guess I didn't realize this until I was rewatching it and then,
Mhm.
researching some of the stuff out online and whatnot, where there's a scene where, he's falling out of the window,
Yes, and it's
you
his
know?
face digitized.
Right. Right, right. So
There was another scene that's in the extended cut. I don't know if you watched the theatrical or the extended, but there's a scene where he's walking, and the reason I know this is because I remember back when it happened.
mhm.
And, there was Inside Edition and Extra, Extra, all those shows. Well, they showed, like, exactly right up until he got shot, and they also showed the digitized face,
Yeah,
and
because
he's
that's it. It was captured on film.
right.
Like, it was captured on film. I remember where I was when that happened. I can remember walking into work and hearing on the radio that he was killed, and now we haven't even gotten to the fact that, the sort of, his father, Bruce Lee,
Correct, another tragedy,
another tragedy,
and
he's
another
doing
bizarre tragedy.
another with a lot of different
Yeah,
stories,
yeah.
it's kinda like getting to the truth. In fact, there's an interview with Brandon on, Australian TV, and we
His
can maybe
last interview.
Now, when did you start in the martial arts thing? Because your dad died almost 20 years ago, didn't he?
Yeah, it's been almost 20 years. It's kind of hard to believe sometimes.
and he's asked about his father's death,
Correct.
and what do you believe and what's the story, and this cerebral edema that he had, and then also there's a story about, like, he had his, what is it, the armpit something in the armpit removed, his sweat glands in his armpits removed,
Right, and he wouldn't
right?
drink water.
Because right, and he's filming these movies, like, in July in the heat, whatever.
Mhm.
So there was all kind of theories that with the heat stroke and that combined with the cerebral edema,
And then
you
there's
know
another story, he had a headache, a migraine,
correct.
and he had an affair with this actress, Tai Ping or something like that. I'm saying her name wrong, but she gave him some kind of analgesic. It was nothing serious, but if you're allergic to it, it can
Correct.
cause the brain to
Right,
swell.
and that was another claim, as it was an
That
allergic
was one of them.
reaction. I mean, Brandon was only 28 years old,
Yeah,
and Bruce was 32. I mean,
32.
very, very close in age.
But
And
the whole story is so creepy knowing the truth.
Mhm.
Knowing because it really was kinda like about his life.
It really was. It's
It
just
was creepy.
it's so strange, and even the fact that he was engaged at the
Right,
time
right,
for, like, couple years, I think, to Eliza,
right, and they put her name up at the end
yeah, Eliza
for
Hutton,
for
but
Brandon and Eliza.
and of course, when this all went down, it seems as though this is where Paramount Pictures said, "We're good," and they didn't want anything to do with the film at that point,
Yeah,
and that's when Miramax steps in, and they
correct.
distribute the film. Um
Alex Proyas didn't wanna finish the film,
mm, you're
and
right,
he was
right,
dead set against the sequels, and
yeah.
now, right now, there's a reboot that was greenlit, and do you know who was the actor?
Bill Skarsgård. Oh, but
Arr.
here's a weird thing. I've also seen things like Jason Momoa and all kinds of crazy things. It's been on good job.
Marky Mark.
But here's what about this that you're talking about. So, but before we get to that, there's
Yeah,
already been 3 sequels,
right, horrible.
all terrible. And
Kirsten Dunst was in one of them. She played
yeah,
the little
she was in the
girl.
second one, I think.
Yeah, she
And
like
then
City of Angels, I
there was a
think.
TV series in Canada about it. Yeah,
Correct.
so they've been
But
tried
they were
to
different characters. They weren't playing
right,
Eric Draven, they were playing somebody else, and they
right,
were trying to redeem somebody else's death. It wasn't the
yeah,
same characters.
right.
The
Now
silliest one was with Edward Furlong.
Edward Furlong, yeah,
I
there's
mean,
a
he
lot of,
looks
like
it's like, what's Edward Furlong dressed like a clown?
that
It was
cast, if you read that cast, is, very interesting, yeah,
yikes.
it's a lot in the same vein, but what I read about this reboot supposedly that's slated for 2024 is it wrapped in 2022. Did you read
S
that?
I think I did, and I was like,
And it's been
I
held
didn't
up
hear
in
about.
post-production
Yeah.
for 2 years? Like, what is going on?
I don't
Now,
know if they're having trouble getting somebody because
is
again, Alex Proyas doesn't want anything to
but
do
it
with it.
so this okay, but if the story is true that this has already been filmed and
Yeah. Where is it?
I don't know, but
And for
Skarsgård?
people
I
who
don't know.
don't know who we're talking about, Bill Skarsgård is famous for being Pennywise in
Pennywise, of
It.
course, from It, yeah. Yeah, so it's right up his alley in terms of the genre, but
Yeah.
now I also saw there was a clip, of course, we've talked about Rob Zombie on the show before, and, in our interview we just had with, filmmaker Bruce Wemple,
Mhm.
we were talking about Zombie because he and I both, as you are, fans of the zombie version. It's
Mhm.
certainly the first Halloween that
The
Zombie
first
did.
one, the second one, not so much.
It grows on you. But Zombie was slated to direct a sequel to The Crow
Oh, I didn't know that.
called The Crow 2037. But yeah, there's a clip of him on Howard Stern talk with his wife. Is it
Uh,
Shelley Moon
no,
Zombie? Sherry.
Sherry Moon
Sherry Moon,
Zombie.
yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, Sherry. And who she also is in a lot of
She's
his
in all of
films,
his
actually.
films,
She's one of
yeah.
his cast, yeah.
Yeah.
But I guess they were trying to turn it into this kind of 90210 version of The Crow. And he's like, I'm good, I'm out. But he wrote the script, like the whole thing was good to go.
Now see,
And he
that I
wanted
would have been
nothing to do with it.
interested
It
in.
would have been very interesting.
Yeah.
Again, I wished he would have been able to complete his Halloween trilogy, but
Right. But
Um,
he didn't want to. They offered him
no, I know.
the third one.
But I think if the relationship, if they just given him what he wanted
Yeah.
and given him the artistic freedom to do what he wanted,
Yeah.
he might have done it. I liked the film. I liked it then. I like it now. It's a very typical 90s film. It looks like it's from the 90s.
Except
The soundtrack, clothes, it's kind of like it's the grunge era, right? At the time,
Yeah.
1994, that all the grunge is going on at that point.
the
Except for
only
what?
thing the only thing I have a problem with is Dick Tracy, which people don't realize this, but he used at the time of the
Yeah.
Dick Tracy comic, there was only 5 colors used in the comics.
Hmm.
And Warren Beatty stayed true to those 5 colors and made for a really unique look.
Yeah.
And then I look at Tim Burton, who gave everybody the matrix for how to make a superhero movie if Richard Donner hadn't already done it. But
Right.
I think what Tim Burton did is giving you the dark way to do it, especially Batman Returns, which I'm one of the few that think it's a better film than the original.
Yeah.
But knowing those were there, and again, the budget was 50 million for Batman. I remember that, and 50 million for
Right. So it's
Godfather 3.
twice the budget on
Twice the budget. I don't know
know.
why at that time,
that.
but some of the things I hated the directing. That's what I really didn't like. To me, the best parts of The Crow are when Brandon is talking and he's engaging with Ernie Hudson, and a couple of those times they just kind of end the scene. And I know it's him supposedly, flying off, but
Right.
it wasn't cut well. There was a lot of slashing and moving with the camera. That didn't I was like trying to get my bearings. What was that? Who was that? What was that? Eric?
No, I didn't.
I just had all sorts of trouble with the directing, and I'm like, this is the guy who did Dark City, which is brilliant. So
Well,
don't hate on me.
yeah, but it was
I'm
also
giving you Dark City.
it was also 4 or 5 years later. So he's honed his craft more by then too, Well, but you liked the film overall, yeah?
Overall, I would,
For what it is,
right. For what it is, it's, it's better than it is worse.
I mean, I liked it. Like I said, it's very much kind of what you'd expect. It reminds me of the films back then that just like literally was filmed on a backlot, not a big, huge production,
In fact,
and I said
today-
Brandon Lee was, he was, the critics were pretty favorable of him before this film came out. He
all
had
you
a
have to do is look at the cover of The Crow. Astonishing, remarkable.
Yeah, but I'm talking about before The Crow.
yeah,
he
I
had
mean,
a
he was
few
in
films out-
nothing big.
No, nothing that ever broke out,
Right.
but the critics were very kind to him.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And you could see he did have he studied Lee Strasberg. I mean, he was
Right.
no chump, you know?
Right. Right.
It just
He had a
sadly
career ahead of him.
he
There's no
absolutely had a
doubt.
career ahead of him.
No doubt.
He had the training, he had the it doesn't hurt that he had the kind of ancestry and,
Right. He had the
you know
looks. I mean,
yeah,
this was a
and
kid that was going to be a star.
I kinda wish there had been some more of his martial artistry in the film, you
I
know?
know.
There wasn't really much at
And
all.
you couldn't tell when it was him and when it was a stunt guy because some of the stuff was really dangerous.
I think most
Jumping
of it
out the windows
yeah, I
and
think much of it was him, but
yeah,
but
I don't know how much.
you do see more of his martial artistry in some of his other films, but, in his own words, and you can read about it, I mean, he being the son of Bruce Lee, and of course, he's 8 years old when Bruce dies,
Right.
that's a tough shadow to walk under if you're gonna study martial arts, which he did from some of Bruce Lee's students at the time.
Yeah.
And he did go on to basically, as he says, I think in that Australian TV interview, he talks about he essentially, attained the title of a black belt,
Correct. Correct.
but I wish I would have seen more of that in the film. Now,
He's a
um,
real soft-spoken guy.
he really is a soft-spoken guy, very well-spoken guy too.
Yeah.
Not that I would expect him not to be, but just yeah, he seemed like
Like
God.
even in the movie, I'm not sure it was acting as much it was just him being him.
Yeah, I
Being,
agree.
and he was
I
really comfortable.
I agree with that. It seemed like, oh, that's just Brandon Lee,
Yeah.
which sometimes you might be critical of, but it seemed to work for
No,
the
I thought it
character.
worked. I thought it worked.
I think it lent the sweetness to his character.
It did. Those were my
You know?
like, I could have done without the rock and roll stuff with
Yeah,
his guitar because they didn't really go into it enough.
not enough. Yeah,
But, when he was soft-spoken talking to the girl and talking to Ernie Hudson, those were my favorite parts of the movie.
yeah, yeah.
Not the effects stuff or man, there was so many guns on that set.
A lot of guns,
A
a lot of
lot
guns,
of guns, a
but
lot of
that
shooting.
pretty typical back then. And
Yeah.
and then I think of like Heath Ledger because I couldn't. You mentioned Batman. Now this, I'm glad. It just made me think. I was saying to my girlfriend as we're watching this because she'd never seen The Crow, which is always exciting, right? To go in and watch a
Mhm.
film that somebody hasn't seen and
Right, and
get their
it.
get their reaction to it. And she
Mhm.
really enjoyed it. Uh, is I couldn't help but think that Heath was inspired a little by Brandon Lee's portrayal of the Crow, if you think of his portrayal in The Dark Knight, because there's some things like you said that Michael Wincott, some lines and
Mhm.
even just the makeup, the way the makeup is done and with the very
Right.
simplistic,
And
but
and, it's funny 'cause the mythology lives in wrestling. There's a couple of
Sting,
wrestlers. Sting is one before
ECW,
him.
yeah.
Yeah, the guy who his character was the Raven, and it was
Yes.
clearly based on the Crow,
Oh, clearly, yeah,
you know?
yeah. But anyways, The Crow, if you haven't seen The Crow, which most people by now would have, I think, seen it, but if you
Right.
haven't, go see it. It's a good film. You can actually, like I did, I mean, you can get the physical medium. Like, I don't know if you have any idea
I don't have the
you don't
physical
have it.
copy, no.
Okay.
But I would recommend highly
Dark City, yeah.
Dark City. This is my favorite sci-fi movie
Yeah, but you
of
gotta
all
you gotta
time.
you gotta throw The Crow in there. I have The Crow on digital, so it's in my digital library.
Yeah.
You can get it on Vudu and the other platforms for it's very affordable. So if you're looking for something, during this time of year, during
And you're a horror
Halloween,
fan.
and you're a horror
It
fan,
fits. All
it
Hallows
fits.
Eve.
It absolutely well, Devil's Night. Yeah,
Devil's Night, that's what I
Devil's
meant.
Night.
The
Same
night
difference.
before, yeah.
Same difference. All right, Mike. Anything else to say about the Crow?
No, I wish we had more Brandon Lee movies to talk about.
Yeah, it's a tragic story. As you said, way too many parallels with the story, with the movie itself and his real life.
Yeah.
It's hard to separate the two, but an enjoyable movie nonetheless. I'd recommend you see it. And we'll see what happens with this reboot. I mean, now I kind of like to see it off the ground. I'm not thrilled about the Skarsgård casting, but
And we
I
don't
think we could
know
do better
yet
than that.
whether it's a reboot Or like,
A
is it a
cont or a
retelling of
continu
that story from '93, or
yeah.
we don't know
Or
that yet?
or I'd like it to be what we're seeing a lot of now, which is a continuation after that point, right?
Right.
Forget everything else, it starts here. Here's where the sequel
Correct.
starts. That I would like to see.
I
That
mean,
would be
literally one of them, I think it's the 4th one, has a
yeah,
0 on
right.
Rotten Tomatoes. I mean, that's hard to do.
And whereas The Crow's got really good ratings. It's got like a
It does.
73 Metascore. It's like 80, 90 something, I think, from the audience on Rotten Tomatoes. And yeah, it's high,
I mean,
got some high
that's
numbers there.
good.
It is
If
good.
you're above 50
Oh yeah.
on the Metascore, you're
Yeah.
doing good.
Yeah. So well, rest in peace, Brandon Lee
Yeah.
and Michael Massey too.
Yeah, I know. I know.
It's just a shame. But I'm glad to as you kind of described that he seemed to make peace with it as best you can. Because if it was me, I don't know how you go on after that. It's just
Yeah, I
wow.
mean, he talked about calling Eliza. He talked
Hmm.
about calling his mother, and
That's
talking
right.
with her. But
Right.
other than that, he
That's
he
it.
didn't share it with anyone.
No.
And he talked about, I don't know if you saw this part of the interview where he talked about being in the park, and there was Eliza married with a young girl.
Yes.
And
Right.
the thoughts of, hey, that was probably going to be Brandon, and
Absolutely.
that's got to be gut-wrenching for you to live with.
Yeah. Yeah. It's hard to even fathom. But well, all right. That's going to do it for another episode of the Yo Brother podcast. I've been your host, Dan Smith. Alongside me, as always, my brother from the same mother, Mike Smith. And we will see you next time.
Bye, everyone.